In addition to being Brad Pitt's stunt double, I'm. Why is that funny? No, I'm Kevin. I'm Kevin Reynolds, editor-in-chief of CoinDesk, and with me today is someone I've known vicariously through her work at the Wall Street Journal, Leslie Cauley. She was there. Let's see, she was a reporter there for 9 years, and then telecom reporter for USA Today, and I think she was chief content officer at Hill & Knowlton for many years as well. And right now she is founder of something called TruthDAO, and she wants to save mainstream journalism from itself. That's her mission, and she does it full time. And Leslie, first of all, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And so why TruthDAO, and what's it about?
Why TruthDAO? TruthDAO grew out of just my own observation of what's going on with national media in particular. And national media does set the tone for coverage in this country, as you well know. And as I watched it kick up, particularly during the tuning into the White House every day looking for the updates, and the thing that drew my attention to that, and I'll set aside the comportment of Trump, I was really focused on the conduct of the White House press corps. And what I observed was just zero interest in really engaging in thoughtful conversation or really getting information that would be helpful. I saw a lot of gotcha back and forth, asking questions that were just silly or just not really helpful in the grander sense. And that was reflected in the coverage, quite frankly, of the pandemic as well, and still is to this day. And about the 15th time, I found myself saying someone really should start an unbiased, nonpartisan media platform. I thought, well, you know what, I can do that. And so that's set me down this path to TruthDAO.
So, yeah, I sort of knew the answer to that question that I asked, to full disclosure. There was actually a survey recently, it was like asking, it was like 40 different countries, and about trust in the media. And I'm pretty sure the U.S. trustworthy media, I think came in 40th, dead last. Okay.
Dead last. Yeah, that was the Reuters Institute of Journalism out of Oxford in London. And every year for 10 years, they have conducted trust in media. It was among many questions they asked. And this past year in summer 21, they surveyed 92,000 people on 6 continents and 46 markets. And the United States mass media ranked dead last behind Nigeria, South Korea, and Poland. And it was just, and again, national media led by those legacy brands like the New York Times, and dead last. Of course, the story was not covered in the United States at all. So,
illustrating the problem. So question: How would TruthDAO, begin to fix that problem?
Well, we do it like you do. Journalism is conducted one story and one reporter at a time, and that's what we will do as well.
Okay, but like how? I mean, what would the mechanism, what would prevent you guys from, how would it be structured? How, who would you hire? How would you vet them? I mean, what would be your secret sauce for making this an unbiased news source?
Well, the thing you're putting your finger on right now is what's called editorial discipline, and that's. Listen, reporters have always had opinions, going back to Edward R. Murrow and before. People have, reporters have opinions. The art and craft of journalism is keeping your opinions in your back pocket and doing your job. Just do your job. And the job is delivering news in a way that is fair, balanced, impartial, and added context. Those are sort of the pillars of basic journalism. It's journalism 101, which is not being practiced right now across the waterfront. And so if you instill discipline, that's where it comes from. I spent a decade at the Journal, and we never sat around talking about should we put our opinions or the breathless string of adjectives. You just didn't do it. And if you did, kind of move in that direction, you got your wrist slapped, and it got taken care of by the copy desk because there was editorial discipline to it. And so that's what we will do as well. And I think one thing that serves us well, we will have a seasoned team of journalists who know what serious journalism looks like. And then you build from there. That's what you do. I mean, it's that old Thomas Jefferson, one man with courage is a majority. We can't do it on our own. We're a DAO, and so it is about the community. This is about building a community, not generating clicks. And you get out and you cover the news. And so that's what we will intend to do.
But how would you recruit? How would you enforce? What would you do? What would the mechanism? Walk me through.
It's through policy. It's how you, as a newsroom, policies, how you conduct yourself, what's allowed, what's not. I mean, I found it interesting not long ago, the New York Times generated a lot of headlines. When the New York Times, the editor put out a note saying that their reporters on social media should stop criticizing each other. Well, why were they doing it in the first place? Why was that allowed in the first place? Why are reporters at the national level, any level, out yammering on about their personal opinions about topics they cover? Why is that permitted? And it would stop overnight if the editorial chain said, you're not doing this, stop it or leave, right? And so there's editorial discipline applies, and that's not what's going on. But the story, that particular development got attention, but no one asked the question, why was it going on in the first place? I mean, Maggie Haberman at the New York Times has 1 million followers. And, there's a lot of talk on that. I mean, and yet she covers things. She covers a very important beat, the White House. And she's not the only one. I mean, it's across the waterfront. And so, we won't have our reporters going on about their personal opinions. It's in every touch point, every touch point, every way you conduct. You can't, trust is earned, not conferred. I can't tell you, trust me, I'm going to do a good job. I have to show you through the stories how I conduct myself. And so that's where you do it, through 1,000 touch points.
Okay. It sounds incredibly idealistic, and as much as I, bemoan what's happened to mainstream media, like reporters right now, what they're doing is they're getting their stories read. Okay, so they're encouraged to use social media to tout their own stuff. Okay, that's sort of the nature because it's moved online. So, and it's all about like basically when I was, when I was starting out in journalism shortly after Gutenberg, it was more like there was no such thing as personal brand except for the TV folk. Okay, it was never. Maybe some of the M&A folks were worried about their brands, etc. But the rank and file journalists, you didn't think of it. You didn't have a brand. Now everybody does, and so you're saying. So these people are going to turn around, these reporters come to work for you, are basically like being asked to sacrifice their brand, and they're not going to be, it's all about getting followers and views and engagement. So you're sort of asking people to not do what they can do other things. And like at other places, like, oh, their opinion is important. You're asking people, are you going to be able to attract reporters willing to do that?
A couple of points to come in on that question. It's a thoughtful question. What I can tell you is that, did a lot of soft sounding, a lot of research before we went down this path that led to the creation of TruthDAO. And what I will tell you is that I've had nothing but affirmative responses from reporters at the national level, at the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, pick a big brand, broadcast as well. And I think journalists on a level do understand that what's going on is troubling to them. If you're a serious journalist and you love the art, craft, and profession of journalism, you understand that this is not how it's supposed to work. And so I think people do want to feel good about what they're doing. And I do think that in an environment where that's nurtured and encouraged, journalists will step up to it. I have a lot of regard for journalists. I have a lot of regard for the business of journalism. I believe in it. It's something you go into because it's about community, where the community is your local community in your hometown, or the community is the United States of America. It's still it's a service business. And I feel that people, if you really care about it, they will step up, and based on feedback. I mean, we'll find out, right? We're not in position to hire in at this point. We will be. We're moving in that direction as far as being able to pay people and compensate people. But based on every data point, Kevin, all I can tell you is it's been nothing but a lot of support. I mean, we're a smaller founding team, but we've got a broad network of people who support what we're doing. And so we'll find out. You know, and then if someone's not comfortable, if they truly want to do the Substack model of it's just about, you know, what they think and their brand, have at it. But we're not going to be your place, because that's not what we're about. And there's plenty of places. The New York Times needs you. If that's what you want to do, go do it. But we're about serious journalism, and our ambition and our intent ultimately has become the go-to place to go to get journalism you can depend on and trust. It's the trust factor. And so that's what we're aiming for.
So right now, what you've got though is, I mean, a lot of people. I mean, you know, people can say they want to eat healthy, but they turn around and, you know, Doritos, please. Could I have Doritos on that? You know, you've got so many people who just, you know, if you just either just like they're in their bubble, they go to Fox or they go to the New York Times or whatever the thing is, and they say, oh, we want, you know, unbiased journalism, yet they only go to one source, the source that sort of echoes what their own thing is, and that's, I think, one of the catalysts for you know, that you have your base, and that's what you want to make them happy so they come back. And so everybody would claim they want unbiased media, like everybody claims they want to eat healthier, but how many people go after the vegetables? Okay, so, you know, is it possible you're overestimating the market?
Look, no one asked for the iPhone either. No one asked for electricity to be invented. I mean, I just feel like if you present something, people are intelligent. People do make choices. Are people going to dump the New York Times overnight and just read us? No. But we can be another read. We can be a second read. And I feel that we'll present, when people see what we're about, see our seriousness of our intent, I think we will find an audience. And so we have a publishing platform. We also have a video platform through Fireside, which is Mark Cuban, Fallon Fatimi, and it's a video. So we have our shows. Again, everything, we're building a news hub on their platform. And then we have the DAO, which is about building a community that supports, advocates for, and is interested in sort of restoration, if you will, of serious journalism. And we think that's a really big group, global, is our eye is on the global market. And so we'll see. But again, until presented with it, you just don't know. You know, what I do know is that, you know, I think one latest survey I saw about the two most trusted brands on media, BBC and the Weather Channel, right? And so I think we can do. I think we can step up. We think there's a market for it. I would also say, like right now, the New York Times has, I think, around 10 million they claim on digital subscribers, but no one's got the pole position. It's a 200 million market globally. Those are New York Times company numbers, and that's English-speaking, college-educated news people who read the news, who have shown an inclination to pay for news. Now, we're not pay, we're DAO, but that's the market. And so the Times has about 10, and right now their two fastest growth categories are crossword and food.
Right.
And so I think there's an opening. We'll see. We'll find out.
Yeah, no, I think it was Bertrand Russell who said, you know, I've been told that man is a rational animal, and all my life I've been seeking proof to find that that's so. He never did. So, you know, I wish you luck with that. But no, I mean, clearly there is a need. The mainstream media, like I assume you saw what happened with the Washington Post with Taylor Lawrence.
Yes.
I mean, she is someone who drives views. She's got like 500,000 followers on TikTok, and meanwhile, she had a story. It was like there was 2 stealth edits to it that should have been corrections, and apparently claimed to reach out to a source she never did to. Now she's blaming the editor, so I don't know where it came from, but there's been no reprisals on any of this. And so, just there clearly is a need for, there's no accountability. How would TruthDAO, enforce this?
Well, the point in the Washington Post is a good one. I believe, listen, the Washington Post has evolved into an advocacy platform that has a particular point of view, and that's get pushed across the news pages. I'll set the editorial page, that is the place for opinions, but across the news pages, it's a clear point of view. New York Times is an advocacy publication. And so I'm not surprised. And you had this back and forth with the reporter blaming the editor, which is just kind of the lamest response a reporter can have. Ultimately, the reporter is responsible for his or her story. If it has your name on it, you read it, there's a process. That's just not a plausible explanation. I don't know what happened, but the fact they're slipping and sliding on the ice like that, it doesn't lend to trust. It doesn't lend to, you look at the post and say, oh yeah, I believe this back and forth. So, and how we address it, I just think transparency is where it's at. And in our case, we would make our policies, just a lot of things that newsrooms don't put out for a lot of reasons. We will. I just think in this environment you have to, as far as how we handle things like that, use of anonymous sources, what's permitted, what's not, that kind of thing. And if you step in it, you say you stepped in it, and you correct yourself and you move on. You don't try to hide it and slip slide. You just say, yeah, we messed up. Here's what happened. Move on. That's it.
And what the actual funding of this? How is this actually going to work?
Well, as a DAO, we're getting ready to do our first NFT release. We're minting, we're doing a small batch initially off of our fireside shows, and then we'll have our Genesis drop will come a little bit later in the summer. And that will provide us with the necessary means to build and do the various things we want to do with the DAO. And of course, we'll have our community input. So we have a lot of ideas, and we're very excited to see what the community wants to do and how we build that and grow it. The editorial operation is independent. It has to be. And in fact, this is an interesting collaboration because DAOs are decentralized. Newsrooms are autocratic. Someone's in charge. There's a process. There's editorial. You can't have people being directed on what to say or how you say it. That's called Facebook. We're not. So it's an independent editorial operation run and conceived and moved along by people who understand journalism.
And you're right about newsrooms being autocratic. I'm a dictator myself. That's a benevolent one, but still, so where's this, do you have a sense that there's a market for it? You talk about, like where's the support coming from?
Well, we have support for
your DAO, like in other words, where do you have a sense of people are getting ready to invest,
Well, we haven't, it's interesting, we've banked up pretty quick. We started from a standing start in mid-March. We've got close to 20,000 people on our channels. They're coming in at a good clip. We have a variety of things we're doing that it's going in a nice direction.
But where are the people coming from? Are these?
We have global. We've got people, a big contingent from Asia, United States, India. We've got a nice, it's coming up nicely. And we're doing things proactively to reach out globally as well. And we have different partners we work with who are very active on that front. And so that's where the support. And then before we ever started this, we kind of threw out a very wide, deep net to see, hey, is this something you would be interested in? Would you read this? Would you participate in this? We're just trying to soft sound it. Ultimately, you have to get out in the market and that's the ultimate test.
That's geographic, but I'm just wondering, do you have a sense as to what demographic that is interested? Are these former journalists? Are these people, independents? Are these the business community? Well,
as far as people are interested in what we're going to do, we're highly inclusive. We just think people who read news are interested in the headlines. That's our audience. We think it will skew a little younger. And if you look at the stats on that, people, younger demographics are open to new ideas. I know sometimes that group gets blasted for saying, being so immersed in social media, but there's benefits to that too, I think. And I feel like that old Star Wars, use your powers for good, not evil. And I think social media actually is a very powerful tool if used constructively. I do think that demographic will respond. I mean, we don't know until we get out, Kevin. But we're building it, and we're looking very broadly just at the whole waterfront. I mean, who reads the New York Times? Who reads like these big brands, a big national? That's our audience.
I noticed that CNN actually, there's a with Zucker leaving, I know that they've turned around, and there's a whole push over there to actually sort of, I think they said, like, we're going to dial back on the breaking news, where breaking news banner, where everything is an alert, everything is just keeping people in a constant state of panic about it, and they're actually trying to go more nuanced. Like actually, like at one point, in my view, is that CNN used to be a standard for objective reporting, and that ship sort of left the harbor a long time ago. So, but like Chris Licht, his mission is to get it back to being more objective. I mean, do you think is that going to be a fad until, or what? What's your comment on that? I mean, is there going to be a need for what you do if CNN gets its house in order?
Look, Chris wrote a really great series of memos. That's great. But you have to have a newsroom to deliver on that. So that's the question, point one. Point two, I took note on some of it. It was in one or more of his memos. He made the point that what we're doing, quote, isn't working, and so we're going to do this now. And I thought it was an interesting thing for him to say, because if it was working, if ratings were still up, then there would be no change to it. And so what about the journalistic integrity of that? That did catch my eye.
So they're doing it just for profit?
Well, I don't know. If it was, quote, working, would they be shifting? And then on the third point, the fact is David Zaslav and John Malone, who is chairman of the board of Discovery, right, who is a long time, one of Ted Turner's best friends, and was on the original CNN board back in the day when CNN started in June 1, 1980s, when it launched. And John's got a long trajectory on that. And he has made it very clear he thinks he needs to get back to doing the news. If you get some serious journalists, would be a great thing. And he said words to that effect. So I don't know. Like I said, great memos. Directionally, it's the right thing to say and do. I guess as a journalist watching this on the side, I would have felt much better if he had simply come out in a more declarative way to say how damaging and how just damaged the brand, it damaged the craft of journalism, and just to be more declarative about it. Not just we're going to do this incrementally and this incrementally, but just to throw it down and just declare. Right? I mean, does anyone think Rachel Maddow has all of a sudden become a thoughtful journalist which is balanced in her approach?
Tell me how you really feel.
Well, I listen. And Rachel Maddow, I mean, she has an audience. There's no question. But it's just, I just feel like I said, I miss CNN. I used to love CNN, and it's a great brand. And I think the more people come in and do serious journalism, the better. I think that we should all get back as an industry, get back to that. And I hope they do.
That will be a challenge because, to me, a lot of the journalists coming up, I know somebody who came out of USC recently who was dismissive of the whole idea of I'm old school myself, okay? You won't know how I voted, okay? My friends, at one point, I must say, I did time in the Marine Corps, obviously. And my friends there all think that I'm a flippin' lefty, and my wife secretly suspects that I voted for Trump. Okay, and that's how it should be in my view. Okay, but I'm old school. I'm sort of this is a friendly interview because we're on the same page. But like, I talked to somebody who recently came from graduated from USC, and she was like, no, you should have a point of view. You should write your point of view. I mean, there's right, there's wrong, and so therefore you should write it. It's like, well, yeah, but whose truth? And just, it's are there going to be enough journalists, coming up that will actually subscribe to the dinosaur point of view that, journalists should be unbiased. You shouldn't be. I mean, I remember back in the day, Linda Greenhouse, who covered one of my favorite reporters at the New York Times, wrote, just covered the Supreme Court. It like created in journalism. It was shocking that she took part in. She took part in, a women's rights march in front of the Supreme Court. Okay, she covered it. What is she doing showing bias there? That was sort of collective navel gazing and debating it among journalists. Now, everybody just marches. It's just, keeping your opinions to yourself is like, it's like, okay, boomer. So are you going to be able to find the people? Jeff Lick, I know why he had to do it incrementally, because if he said, we're doing this way tomorrow, his newsroom might leave, because that's not how they think.
Well, maybe a lot of his newsroom should leave. Maybe it should be backfilled and populated with people who understand serious journalism, and they're out there. And I do think in this environment, Barry Weiss is a good example. And she was unusual. She was able to stand up. I had a lot of respect for her for doing that. It's not an environment where journalists feel they can speak up. All I can tell you, Kevin, is I've had a lot of discussions with a lot of people, journalists. Some are attached currently, others have peeled out to do other things, and they understand the need for it. And as far as the young woman from USC, listen, I don't blame young people coming through. The journalism schools, I think, play a very important role as a starter. You don't have to go to journalism school to be a journalist, of course, but it's one place. But that's, again, I go back to editorial discipline, and we're people who know what serious journalism looks like, and to instill those values and that eye on how you do your job. It's not dinosaur. Those are the fundamentals of journalism. That's what American journalism is about. It's called the fourth estate for a reason. It's always supposed to be the check and balance. It plays a very important role. It's a purpose. There's a purpose to it. There's a purpose to journalism. It's not in the whole Substack. And listen, there's a market for that. And I appreciate that too. And I'm not saying journalists shouldn't have an opinion and shouldn't feel free to voice that opinion. And the Substack model provides for that. But you can't do both. You can't be yammering on about your opinions and also go cover the same topic and say, but just trust me. And a friend of mine, a longtime journalist, says it's the equivalent of Chief Justice Roberts. If he told you all his personal opinions about everything coming before the court, but he said, but don't worry, when it comes into the court, I'll do the right thing. Would you believe him? Would you? Probably not, right? And so I feel it's the same thing, and journalists do have special, some say burden, I say responsibility, proudly so. It's if you go into the business, that's what it is. If you don't want to do that, then don't go into the business. Or find another job. Go to Substack. There's a lot of people with a lot of opinions. And again, I would never, pull back on the ability of a journalist to generate income, to the personal brand thing. Me personally, zero interest in that. I love journalism. I see the need for it. I see the calling for it. And I'm 65 years old. I've been at this more than 30 years, and I know the arc of it. I know what serious journalism looks like, and that's what this is about.
Let's see. We've got. So we've got less than a minute left, but I've been told we can go over, and they won't actually bring the hook out and the shock collars for another 20 minutes or so. So I can open this up to questions. Do people have questions? And there's a microphone. Yes. Which I can't see because of the lights, but yes.
Hi, thank you. So I work in one of those journalism departments that you're talking about back in Australia, and I agree with you around, the integrity and the responsibility and all of those points. But it's not just in journalism schools that journalists learn that. They learn it by doing obituaries or the court circuit or local town council meetings, and they're the bits of journalism that don't get funded anymore, particularly in Australia anyway. Investigative journalism, public interest journalism is something that I can see could be sustained through things like DAOs because people see purpose in them and they get interested in them. But how do you actually fund the mundane journalism beats, which is where people learn those skills, but also sometimes where important stories emerge from?
Yeah.
Thank you for the question, and I agree with you 100%. I started out working at a local paper, making $5 a story, and I bartended at night to pay my rent, and I was just so happy. My poor father was like, "We sent you to college for this," that kind of thing. But I learned, and you get good, and you get resourceful, and when you have to work at it to get people to talk to you, you do learn well. And I think the answer is, in an environment of like our newsroom, we'll have a variety and mix of beats and people doing and covering a variety of things. Now, some of the things you identified are purely local, but I feel like there is a market for it. There's a need for it. It's a very important learning tool, and there are ways to accommodate it. Every newsroom, ultimately, all journalism is local, and I think that just not to overlook it, and to give attention to it, and you have to consider your audience. There's a lot of considerations for that, but the role of journalism schools, I think, is critical in that too, because this is where kids get out and they scatter out and do stories, and they get a feel for it. They start with it and all of that. If you have time after this session, I'd love to talk to you more about that.
If I may, like I said, I actually share a lot of. Share a lot of Leslie's opinion about the state of the industry. I'm just not quite as optimistic. But I'll just tell you, as far as I know, that Leslie views that that's probably the most important thing in the world right now is the state of journalism, because if you don't have something that can hold the power, to hold it to account, everything else falls apart. And, I'll just tell you, when I started out, I was a State House reporter in New Jersey, and there were enough newspapers there in Press Row that you could field a softball team, okay? And you would play against Senate Democrats and state troopers who always kicked the reporters' asses, of course, but, there was that many. And like with consolidation and the move to online, it's like you couldn't even field like an infield now with the amount of reporters there. And so stories not getting covered, legislation gets passed, it doesn't get covered. And actually, one of the things that I find interesting is that actually, like, hedge funds actually hire former reporters to staff some of these places, to the capitals, to get court decisions and stuff, and to get legislation, so that they can make trades on this stuff and make money for themselves, because the press isn't doing it anymore. So I mean, it really is, for me, a critical thing. You don't know what your congressman or your legislator is actually doing, what bills they're doing or anything like that. So I mean, the stakes are very, very high. I concur totally, as far as like, and to the lady's point, that is, it is something key, and hopefully, I hope the TruthDAO does work. I have questions whether people are willing to pay for it. I mean, they might stay that, and I hope that, because we do need it, or because there's a lot of stuff that needs uncovering, and like I said, important stories that need doing, that aren't glamorous, that aren't about your brand. It's about, it is a calling. I mean, nobody gets into journalism to get rich. So that's I wish you luck on that. But
well, you put your finger on another important point, as far as the real. Thank you for the question again on the very localized coverage in the DAO environment. And what we talk about is reimagining citizen journalism, right? And citizen journalism, and the idea in a pure sense, citizens going and covering journalism, but if you really think about it, all journalism has a citizen journalism aspect to it, right? In the DAO environment, we feel that we can make use of our community to leverage in some of those directions for the truly local stories and local markets. And again, to be determined once we get our DAO going and have those conversations with standards imposed, of course, because everything that goes across our network, across our platforms, is edited by us according to our standards. But we feel there'd be a way to channel, and just this sense of we're in this together, we're covering the world, and there'd be a way to use that. So we're still giving thought to it, but we feel there's a way to get that done, to get the job, how to get the job done. And so we feel the DAO environment does give us a lot of leverage and a lot of creative flexing that we can do here and there. So we'll to be determined.
I will say that the capitalist model, at least as it currently is now, where you have your paywall, it leads to people just playing for their base. I mean, and so you want to keep your base happy, so you give them what they want, only what they want. You don't want to give them, troubling other sides. I'm reminded of during when Donald Trump was running for president, Les Moonves who was the head of CBS at the time, said something to the effect of about all the coverage, because he was so entertaining, he got so much press coverage that you really didn't know who was running against him in the primary. It just he got everything. And I think the quote was, speaking about the amount of attention that CBS was giving Donald Trump, it was like, it may not be good for America, but it's damn good for CBS, because the ad sales just were through the roof because of it. They just loved it, and you could argue they paid the price, because it's if you have a bunch of people running, and you're only getting one candidate coverage, that's not really what democracy should be supposed to be about.
Yeah, that's just cynical off the charts is what that is. And I would also point out we're an ad-free environment. We don't accept ads. This is about building a community, not generating clicks. At some point down the road, if we were to ever entertain that idea, something we would discuss with our DAO community, but it would be according to our rules. It would be according to our standards on the advertisers. We will not be doing all the mess that people have to contend with advertising and the cookies and tracking people, and we won't be doing any of that. So to be determined, Kevin, but it's like we're ad-free. We're kind of pure. We have a pure mission and a pure thing we're trying to get done here, and that has our focus.
Will your reporters be able to tweet? Will they be allowed on social media?
Pardon me?
Will your reporters be allowed to be on social media to tweet?
Sure. I mean, in the context of talking about stories, I mean, back in the day, at the Wall Street Journal, we all went on CNBC.
Right.
We all did the morning shows. We all talked about stories we had broken, and no one had to tell us, don't go off talking about your personal opinions. It was never a conversation. It was just understood you don't do that, because of the environment, the editorial environment we were all living in, and proudly so. It was just never occurred to me to do something like that. And so I think the culture of a newsroom matters a great deal. I hear about reporters saying they're afraid because a story or a headline. I just think it's the most preposterous thing on the planet, because when I think about that, I think about war correspondents, I think about photojournalists who are on the front lines, even right now in Russia, Ukraine. I mean, this is what they do. And it's just that goes with the job, the territory. So to be afraid about a headline or a story, there's just a huge disconnect to me. So, yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Hi, thank you, Leslie, for the work you're doing as well. With the White House now using TikTok influencers to give press briefings to, I was wondering if you have any plans to utilize social media influencers to spread the word about what you're doing with TruthDAO.
We have as of right now, we're not doing any of that. Anything that we were to do in that direction would, of course, be well vetted, and we would just consider the implications for how that's viewed as far as we're about building trust. Everything we do, every touch point that's number one. And there is nothing above that. That's number one. And so anything we did, if there was something constructive to do, and I don't see that model out there right now, but I'm not taking anything off the table. We would be open to ways to converse and bring people in and engage people. We want to make it interesting. It's, listen, the news business is a very interesting business. It's very impactful. It can be entertaining at times. I mean, it's a whole waterfront. So we would make use of all the tools, and we have the benefit of having a very talented marketing person with us, Gary Goldhammer, who's just sort of a brilliant, been at it 25 years, and worked for the big PR shops globally, and really knows he's a performance marketing specialist, and so that's his area, and we in fact will be talking about that in some of our written published content about our approach to those sorts of things. So thank you for the question.
Let's see. Oh, yes. I realized I was just looking at that side of the room.
So a lot of us probably don't really know how newsrooms work. And we see kind of the effect of the cat's out of the bag with the clickbait headline, right? Everyone looks at the headline, barely reads the actual article. Why try to keep the newsroom sort of, ultimately centralized autocratic model and not go for something that is a little bit more it's more on the user to find out the truth, like, a headline, and here's the opposing viewpoints, and it's all like crowdsourced, like completely free market versus this, keeping that, the standards that you're talking about in a centralized newsroom. Why go for something like that where people will still, at the end of the day, probably doubt, the standards of the integrity because people are cynical these days? Why not go totally free market with something like this?
There's plenty of options for that. And if that's the inclination, people certainly can. But we are, again, our goal is to be the platform in America that you go, and listen, the world watches America. So we're US-based and US-focused, but the world watches America. And so we would like to be and assume that mantle the New York Times used to have of being the place where you go, where you're the most trusted news platform in the country. And that's what we would like to do. There's plenty of the other you just described. There's options, right? But this is what we're doing, and for the reasons I've been speaking to here the last half hour. This is what we're about, to address a need, and there's a vacuum in the market. And what we're doing, it's hard. It's hard. It is, because there's this crush of the headlines and the clickbait, and the New York Times does A/B headline testing. And if something doesn't track well, or they get too much blowback on Twitter, or they'll change a headline. Back in the day, like at the Journal, reporters had no say on headlines. It was very hard to get a headline changed, and it was a real, like, everything had an editorial discipline attached to it. So that's why I go back to. Why not do that? Because that need's already been addressed. What we're doing, really no one's doing in that sense. And so, again, we'll see how well it's received. We'll see. But we're hopeful based on a lot of data points and just, straw polls kind of thing. We think there is a market for it.
Hello, thank you for the panel first. I really appreciated explaining the difference between influencers and journalists, which seems the word that's our time to get today. The question is, could you please expand a little more on the mechanics and the architecture of the DAO itself? Because it seems there is a head of it, but the DAO as a structure is as you said also earlier, mentioned, is democratized, right? So how do these two parts work together? There is a voting part, and there is the need of something applying strict discipline, and I understand that. So I was curious on how you're going to put the two parts together architecturally and mechanically.
Thank you for the question. As you may be aware, the concept is a business construct. DAOs, it's an old concept, and it's newly applied to the crypto space. There is no, quote, way it's done with DAOs. I mean, you can read the academic description of a DAO, but in practice, they're all over the map. And so in our case, we are throwing down a template on how to do a news-focused DAO. And it has two parts to it. there's a community aspect, and the community will be very engaged, and we hope and we believe we'll have a very large, diverse, global, engaged community. And then there's the editorial part, which is independent, and it has to be for all the reasons I've described. And if you go into our DAO, you understand that going in. If that doesn't appeal to you, don't come in. That's how we're going to do it. And as far as the mechanics of it, we'll finesse it as we go forward, and we're giving a lot of thought to that, because in truth we do have one world. We have 1 foot in crypto regulated, unregulated world, and 1 foot in regulated world, because we do interact, and we will be with other partners that aren't, they're steeped in the regulated side. Fireside, for example, it's a very cool, dynamic Web3, very participatory, live, interactive, but that is on the regulated side. And then we have our unregulated side. We don't view it that way, but legally it is important to do that. Just for legal reasons, it's very important to be mindful of these things. And so we will finesse it going forward. But the way we look at it and what we've been told, and we think this is true, we are creating a brand new template. Now, others, no doubt, will iterate on that and improve on that, and we hope they do. And we will adapt it and adjust it as we need to make it work. Because ultimately, we want this to be successful, to work for our community, and to be successful on the editorial side. And so, but there is no there's nowhere to go to say this is how a DAO should operate. I mean, point to one you would say is well done, well executed, and that we would like to be providing example of one that is well done and well executed. But again, we're being very thoughtful and very deliberate in how we approach all this stuff.
So in my career before coming to CoinDesk, I did 23 years at Bloomberg, and there was what's always called the Chinese wall between the terminal side of the business and the news side, and basically we told ourselves in editorial we don't care about that other side, okay? But there's always a tension, do you report about yourself, etc. But the goal in journalism at the time was, if you always wanted to be independent so that if Bloomberg ever did something wrong, you could report on it, because that's what journalism does, okay? You screw the owner, you report on it regardless, okay? Now, I would say, what's happened in newsrooms is that it's sort of broken down. We're sort of where it's all about, because it's about paywall, that actually the reporters to an extent are sort of working toward getting the audience up, and that means pleasing the audience and only giving that point of view. What's different about the TruthDAO is that the community, you don't have any antagonism, because basically the community wants there to be independent journalism, okay? And so therefore, and the way to do that is by strict standards. So therefore, you have a harmony there that you don't have in a traditional, where the commercial's always battering down, trying to get coverage that will boost viewers, as opposed to, as opposed to truth, okay? The commercial side doesn't give what's technical term, rat's ass, okay, about the truth, okay? It doesn't care about that. It's about profits. So there's always that tension, and that like I said, that has fallen apart in recent years. And with the TruthDAO, as I understand it, you're going to have the community itself actually wants there to be this discipline to get the truth out there. So I think is that fair to say?
Yes, it's good summary.
Yeah. So I think we have time for one more question before they get the shot collar. You in the back.
Hi, how are you? I'm one of those people that thinks that names really matter, people's perception of a name or a brand. Was there any talk or concern about TruthDAO being associated with Truth Social, that people might confuse the two or think that TruthDAO is affiliated with Truth Social in some way?
No, I've been asked that, and I appreciate the question. I think Truth Social is very much associated with Donald Trump. And
That's why I'm asking.
yeah, and they will do what they do. And ours is no. We feel it's a good snapshot on us. We had our name first, would add, but we think we're comfortable, and we feel that it suits us for what we're doing. I mean, if it behooved us at some point to change it for whatever reason, which is always the right of any entity, we could certainly entertain. But we see no need for that. And we're not worried about it at all.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie, for your time, and thank you all of you for attending. Leslie Cauley, good luck to you.
Thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you.